Finn hit the tunnel running. Behind him raced a blur of green and black as Maleficent sped through the air, her arm pointed in front of her and leading the way, closing the distance. The boys ran side by side now, Maleficent behind them and closing in fast, like a shell game. The boys passed the plans back and forth between them, then switched positions as they ran, and passed the plans again. For someone behind them where Maleficent now followed, it grew impossible to determine which boy had the plans. Then, just as Maleficent was nearly upon him, the boys split up, running in 3 different directions.
I've got them, don't worry, just run!
Finn took an exit door to his left. He raced up the stairs at a furious speed, glancing behind. No Maleficent. She followed Maybeck. Finn broke into blinding daylight. He checked the tube of papers tucked into his wrist. Thrilled the plan had worked. Fresh air. Park music. For a moment, Finn couldn't figure out where he was. A cast member door led out into Tomorrowland. That was wrong. He was out of position. Finn fled through the door and out onto the busy concourse. At midday, the area bustled with activity. A steady stream of guests in a chaotic mass of t-shirts, shorts, and the smell of suntan lotion. How long would it take for Maleficent to discover their trickery? The plan had been to rendezvous with Amanda on the bridge between Tomorrowland and the Central Plaza. But which way? Finn had left the utilidors via the wrong exit. He heard the crowd scream to his right. He was familiar with all sorts of sounds in the Magic Kingdom, but this particular roar sounded out of place. A second later, Maybeck came out of the same cast members only door. He was out of breath and sweating.
She's after Philby!
Another scream broke from the distance. Some little kid shouted, "Aladdin! Aladdin!" and cut through the thick crowd to reach Maybeck, who they mistook for the character. Maybeck tried to get away from here. Parents called their kids to be polite. A line formed behind Maybeck as he and Finn set out walking.
We should have lost the wardrobe.
I don't know, maybe we can use this.
He handed Maybeck one of the pens.
You're kidding me.
The children caught up and surrounded them both, their autograph books out and ready.
Sign some autographs, Aladdin.
Maybeck clenched his teeth and whispered to Finn.
How do you spell Aladdin?
Finn spelled it out for him as yet another excited scream pealed from the crowd, this time much closer. A sea of park guests parted to his right. A green witch, Maleficent. She walked quickly and deliberately, and was just scary enough, looking to hold her admirers at bay.
Head down.
Maybeck ducked, continuing to scribble out autographs furiously. The green-faced witch and her following sea of fans passed them by. Finn backed away from the clot of eager children.
That's all.
Maybeck was suddenly hooked on this autograph writing. He made no attempt to stop.
Aladdin, you're gonna be late.
Maybeck finally gave in. He made his apologies and he and Finn moved on. The crowd up ahead, the group following Maleficent, stopped, colliding into one another. This because the witch had stopped and turned. But why? Finn moved in the other direction. He came face to face with Jess.
Give us the pen and the plans and we won't hurt you.
Several things happened at once. First, Finn spotted a group of 4 or 5 seagulls clustered atop a white fence. Then he saw Amanda. She stood inside the same white fence. The gulls perched overhead. She signaled Finn to join her. Third, Jess reached for the plans and stole them from him.
Go!
Finn ordered Maybeck, and there was Philby standing next to Amanda, also beckoning them over to the fence. Finn dozed at Jess, knocked her down, and took the plans back. She sat up on the pavement, mumbled something, and cast a spell at Finn. He felt a sharp pain flood through him. His knees went weak. The dreaded sense of cold overcame him. Jess smiled at her success, got to her feet, and stepped toward him. Finn fought against the spell by thinking of himself as pure light, as DHI, even though he was just Finn Whitman, the boy. He allowed her no power over him, refused to give in. As he did, something strange happened. His fingers tingled. A woman in the crowd gasped. "Oh my gosh, look who it is." Finn was crossing over, becoming his DHI. He mentally pushed against Jess. The harder he pushed, the more his body turned to light, a hologram. The next spell she tried to cast passed right through him and turned a small tree just behind him into solid ice. The crowd applauded and cheered, children shouting, "More! More!" Jess lunged at Finn, but she too passed right through him. Again, the crowd cheered. She dared to try again. This time Finn stepped into her and stopped. He moved with her in perfect lockstep, able to somehow know her every thought. She spun in circles, trying to get rid of him. They were a single entity now, spinning and glowing. Two kids in one. The crowd went wild. Finn resisted the cold. He felt warmth replace it. He heard her calling out.
Your Grace!
She sounded desperate and afraid. The crowd roared their approval, a spinning vortex of light, and the girl's wild cries for help. Finn stepped away from her, and Jen spun to a stop, dazed. She raised her head slowly while studying her hands and her arms, touching her forehead as if they didn't belong to her. She met eyes with Finn.
I can't believe it. I'm free.
Free from what? Finn wondered.
You did it. No more cold. No more Maleficent. You freed me.
Jez's eyes brightened, her voice filled with excitement. With that, the most startling thing happened. Jess changed. She transformed, right before Finn's eyes. The crowd applauded as her hair changed from jet black to sandy blonde. Her eyebrows and eyelashes became lighter as well, and a few freckles appeared on her cheeks. She was, without question, a different girl, a beautiful girl, and yet familiar. Finn couldn't get over the feeling that he'd met her before, that he knew her, this new girl. And then he glanced back to his friends and saw Amanda there calling for him. A spike of astonishment filled him, and he felt the DHI dissolve and the real Finn return. Amanda's face filled with light, with an expression of joy Finn had never seen. Tears filled her eyes. Finn looked back and forth between the two girls, Jess and Amanda, and it couldn't be. But it was. They were sisters, twins perhaps, not identical but close to it. Only then did he understand Amanda's efforts, her never giving up. Only then did he wonder if Amanda wasn't some kind of witch herself, a good witch. The crowd exploded into celebration. Maleficent's green form streaked toward them. As Finn, a boy again, reached the fence, he faced Amanda.
Why didn't you tell me?
You weren't ready.
Amanda stood in front of a large yellow cylinder sticking out of the ground, with a thick circular steel trapdoor on top. A number of warning posters instructed proper use.
The others went ahead. Go!
But it's the trash chute.
Go! Feet first. Quickly. Jump.
She seemed distracted. Finn followed her line of sight. Maleficent had caught up to Jess, but Jess held her hands out in front of her, and try as Maleficent might, she could not get close to the girl. Raging with anger, Maleficent suddenly saw Finn.
Is Jess who I think she is?
Jess, not Jess, not anymore. How can we ever thank you? We couldn't break the spell ourselves.
Tears spilled from her eyes.
Then she is... Then you are...
Finn's head swam, but he stopped himself as Maleficent raised her hand to cast a spell. Seeing this, Finn jumped down the trash chute. From high overhead, he heard Amanda's gleeful voice echo as he fell.
I'll never forget what you did.
As he was sucked down the foul-smelling tube, Finn tucked the rolls of plans under his belt. He took a deep breath and gagged. He thought he might throw up. The tube reeked of rotting trash. Gooey bits and sticky globs of rancid food and soggy litter stuck to him like leeches, licking his face and slobbed into his hair and clothing. Again, he felt himself gag. In the distance far down the tube, echoing through the metal, Finn heard hoots and hollers, Maybeck and Philby. The suction spit trash into his face. He slammed into some kind of mesh gate, an intersection of converging trash evacuation tubes. On the other side, black garbage bags and trash raced past. Then the gate opened and it was his turn. He tumbled down and rolled into the next tube, picked up speed, and headed off again, upside down and backward. Wind roared all around him. A garbage bag smashed into him. It broke open, its trash freed. Awful stuff raced around him and stuck to him. He braced himself just in time for another intersection, but this gate was open and he moved into the third larger tube. Aluminum cans peppered his head. Cellophane and cotton candy stuck to him. Diapers, orange peels, and sticky popsicle sticks. He somersaulted to avoid this stuff, and there, behind him, came a dull green light. It grew larger. It moved quickly. He was thrown into a back somersault. As he came around, he found himself facing Maleficent. Arms at her side, head forward, legs outstretched behind her, she flew effortlessly through the garbage tube, apparently unaffected by the suction.
Miss me?
She lunged. Her ice-cold hand grabbed for the scroll. Finn kicked out and pushed her back. Her wide eyes narrowed in hatred. She lunged again. Finn straightened himself out and gained speed. He briefly pulled away from her. Through the roar, he heard her mumble, "Anima transformatu." Finn ducked as she flicked her wrist at him. A sandwich bag next to him melted and transformed into a rat. That spell had been meant for him. At once the rat came alive, its tail swiping, its little feet crawling for purchase. Maleficent closed the gap. Finn tore a hole in a garbage bag, scattering its contents. He heard a clank of metal not far ahead, yet another gate. The rat scrambled and scratched at Finn. If he and Maleficent crashed into a gate together, she would have him in the plans. He felt certain of it. She wound up to deliver yet another spell, the two of them racing toward the slimy tube. Finn grabbed a hold of the clawing rat and threw it at her. Maleficent fought off the rat and came right for Finn. He saw a small white glowing circle grow larger and wider. The end of the tunnel. Finn could smell the fresh air. He tried to buy himself some time.
You forgot something. Evil never wins in the Magic Kingdom.
That depends on whose magic it is.
Propelled out the end of the trash tube, Finn flew through the air and crashed into a sea of trash bags and an enormous steel collection box, like a railroad car. He scrambled toward the edge, where he saw Finn and others, men and women, surrounding the huge collection bin.
Hurry!
Finn reached for the edge, pulled himself up and over, and fell to the ground, splattering, soaking wet with trash. There he saw Philby and Maybeck, also covered in goo. He watched as Maleficent shot out the end of the trash tube and into a giant container. The team of adults quickly produced a net, dragging it from one end to the other, and trapping her inside.
To the bus, quickly!
As Finn ran, he heard Maleficent's wails of complaint from the bin. Maybeck, Philby, and Finn caught up to Wayne, the old guy limping along.
You're not going to...
No, we don't kill anything here, not even witches. We'll give her a taste of her own jail, the one you found, for a while. It'll give us time to determine how much power the Overtakers have gained. You've done well. We're almost through. Almost?
The three boys came to a stop at once. They all boarded the bus. Finn handed Wayne the plans and the pens. Wayne looked back at them, grateful.
Good job, kids.
Looking out the window of the castle apartment, having crossed over just before 10 o'clock, Finn thought the park looked beautiful. He wondered if he'd ever know the truth about Amanda, if he'd ever see her again, for she'd been noticeably absent from school that Monday. He thought about Maleficent saying that there were Overtakers far more powerful than she was, and he wondered if more adventures lay in store for him and his new friends. Willa was the last to cross over. She appeared in the room, wearing a cotton nightgown that flowed to her ankles.
My mom put me to bed. Nothing much I can do about it.
Finn looked around at each of his new friends. He liked them all, though each for a different reason. He unrolled the faded blueprints of the park. They examined them, fascinated to see how the park had started out. Wayne explained what they were looking at. From the group of pens and pencils on the coffee table, Wayne selected a boring-looking black one. It was fat and bulged, a very old fountain pen. Wayne put on a pair of sunglasses. He passed out glasses to all the kids too, and told them to put it on.
Now we finally put the two together.
How will we know if it's right?
Believe me, we'll know.
Wayne's aged face was twisted into a smile. Wayne contemplated the pen, then passed it to Finn.
This is for you, I think.
He indicated a small metal lever on the end of the pen. Finn picked up the pen, carefully unscrewed the cap, and hooked the small lever with his fingernail. He looked up at each of the others, their expectant eyes filled with curiosity and excitement.
Hold it up high.
Finn did so and pulled on the lever. A single drop of dark ink splashed down on the plans. Finn, Wayne, and all the kids jumped back. The drip of ink settled, then expanded and bled out into each and every faded line drawn onto the plans. It raced from one to another, spreading faster and faster. Faint lines became solid and bold. The detailed plans transformed, one page after another. Some of what Finn saw was familiar, an area of Frontierland, a piece of Liberty Square, but much of this was foreign to him, parts of the park never before seen.
Come look.
Wayne was now standing by the small window. He tore the theatrical gel from the window. The kids joined him, squeezing together. Below, the dark park filled with light, following the same pattern that the ink flowed through the plans. Light rushed up the lanes and streets, jumped over benches and engorged trees. Attractions came alive, first on the outer edge of the Magic Kingdom, but steadily rushing toward the castle. Faster and faster, the light traveled through the park, brighter and brighter. It arrived at the castle from all directions, a brilliant white light racing up the walls. The kids jumped back, blinded. The sky erupted with fireworks, throwing blazing colors and lights into the heavens. Deafening explosions and blinding colors. The local newspaper would report the next day that a private party at the Magic Kingdom had been responsible for the most amazing show of fireworks the park had ever seen. But Finn and the other DHIs would know differently. With the sky still erupting outside, Wayne walked over to Finn and extended a hand of thanks. They shook hands. The kids cheered and formed a huddle. As they spun in celebration, Wayne returned to the coffee table. There, he picked up the black remote and pushed the button.
You're still here? It's over. The book's over. Go home.